listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to The Briefing. Recent statistics from Royal Lifesaving Australia have revealed in 2025, Australia recorded the highest number of drowning deaths on record, with teenagers and young adults most at risk. We unpack why swimming skills are declining across the country, the hidden dangers of rips and unpatrolled beaches, and what you can do to stay safe in and around the water this summer.
But we would always just reinforce the importance of having a solid foundation in terms of swimming and water safety skills, building those layers of resilience, helping people enjoy the water and helping them enjoy the water safely.
That's all coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with the Listener News team. It's Monday, the 29th of December.
Good morning, I'm Lauren Howarth. The families of those killed and injured in the Bondi Beach terror attack have urged the PM to establish a royal commission. They've written a joint letter to Anthony Albanese saying rising anti-Semitism here in Australia requires a powerful national response. 15 people were killed in the horrific attack, dozens of others were injured. Donald Trump says he had a good and very productive call with Russian President Vladimir Putin ahead of his meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The two leaders are meeting in Florida to discuss an updated version of a US-brokered 20-point peace plan. A man's due to face court today after allegedly driving his taxi at a federal police officer at Sydney Airport. The 27-year-old's been charged with several offences. And iconic French film star and singer Brigitte Bardot has died at the age of 91. Master Lock Comanche has claimed line honours in the 2025 Sydney to Hobart. The crew is saying it was a welcome redemption after being forced to retire early in last year's yacht race due to mainsail damage. And there's fresh pressure on the SCG curator after the controversial Boxing Day test pitch. Aussie cricket star Travis Head saying he feels for the under fire MCG curator.
It's bloody tough. You leave 1 or 2 mil on with high quality bowling and you find yourself short.
Thanks to the Listener Newsroom for those headlines. Now it's time for our deep dive in how to stay safe in and around the water this summer. In this episode, we're joined by Justin Scarr, a leading expert in water safety, who explains why we've seen an alarming increase in drownings in Australia, from the impact of COVID on water safety to the cost of living crisis preventing many families from continuing swimming lessons, to the dangers of unpatrolled beaches and hidden rips. Justin breaks down the factors putting so many Australians at risk. Justin, thanks so much for joining us. These latest statistics from your new national drowning report for this year are shocking. Australia has recorded the highest number of drowning deaths since records began. Why?
Well, when we released those figures, we described it as a massive wake-up call for the Australian community in all states and territories, and very specifically in local communities. The years since COVID, we've seen significant changes in the patterns of behaviour for many Australians. People seem to be avoiding crowds, so they're finding themselves in really unfamiliar locations, well away from the eyes and the gaze of lifeguards. We've also seen a pretty significant decline in swimming ability that started with kids missing out on swimming lessons, but it's continued right across the Australian population. The Australian population is particularly diverse and it's just not swimming as well as it used to. And then the final factor really is the cost of living crisis. I think many people are finding it really difficult to afford and fund swimming lessons. They're dropping out, they're missing out, and that's particularly affecting teenagers that probably didn't get any lessons during the pandemic period.
Justin, just on that point, when you break down these statistics, drowning deaths of children under 5 actually fell, but concerningly, the drowning rate increased 4-fold for people aged between 15 to 24. Does that point to the fact that you mentioned earlier about the fact that for many reasons we don't have a lot of well-skilled teenagers that have had swimming lessons or understand swim safety?
Yeah, we've in fact been really successful in almost eliminating child drowning, young children in backyard swimming pools. Many of your listeners would be familiar with the importance of closing the gate, making sure the pool fence is in good working order. That, coupled with early swimming lessons, has really reduced drowning rates in children quite low. In fact, they're the lowest at age 10. but they rapidly increase after 10, quite staggeringly. And we think that what's happening here is that there are some portions of society where kids swim really, really well, and there's a big chunk of people, particularly people in outer metropolitan areas and regional areas, that almost don't swim at all. And for parents, they've really got to understand that at 15 or 16, their children are no longer swimming under their watch. They're out and about with their friends. They're choosing the waterways they swim in. They're participating in all sorts of high-risk activities like jumping from bridges, and it catches them out if they can't swim. And that's what we're seeing in drowning statistics, and it's deeply disturbing.
Justin, how concerning is the fact of rips still today in currents? Because even if you are swimming between the flags, that's incredibly important, because if you do get into trouble, there are lifesavers there to help save you. But how dangerous is it? It seems to be a growing proportion of the public swims sometimes at night or early morning and at unpatrolled beaches or waterways.
Yeah, it's a particular issue through the Christmas, New Year period where people are holidaying, camping, perhaps at holiday houses at the wrong end of the beach, and they find their way to a location well away from life-guarded areas. I think climate is also a factor where people try and avoid the sun, so they go early or they go late. One of the things that we should consider is when you swim between the flags, in many cases, you don't swim, you just stand. You stand, you jump waves, you splash about, you have a lot of fun. And lifeguards are there and lifesavers are there to keep you out of trouble if you get caught by a rip or you swim over your depth. At the other end of the beach, where there are rips, if you're just standing in the water, a rip can take you into deep water very, very quickly. And if you couple that with people just not being able to swim, you get yourself into trouble very, very quickly, and there's no one around to help other than perhaps parents, neighbours, family members, and quite often their swimming ability is not up for a rescue either. So that's when we see some surfers initiate rescues, but that's also when at this time of year we see dads and family members drowning as a consequence of trying to rescue their children, and those children are poor swimmers caught in rips.
So Justin, let's talk about solutions. Do you think, going back to the basics about swim safety and swimming lessons, we know, as you mentioned earlier, cost of living crisis, they're incredibly expensive. Do we need to look at government-funded swimming lessons, because we know swim safety is beneficial on so many levels?
Yeah, in fact, we've just released an Australian water safety strategy where we've identified three national imperatives to turn this around. And one of them is swimming and water safety skills for all, irrespective of background, irrespective of postcode, and in some respects, irrespective of age. Parents do the heavy lifting when it comes to swimming and water safety. They enrol early and they go often, but our research shows that they give up really young. Many people are finding that they just can't keep their children in lessons beyond the age of 6. They may not be able to afford it. They feel like they've ticked a box and it's done. But reality is the skills that we used to learn in late primary school, early secondary school are just as important for keeping people safe in and around the water. So our position is let's go for the second dose of swimming and water safety. Round about the age of 10, if you're noticing your child can't swim 50 metres and float for 2 minutes, now's the time you need to get them back into lessons before they become teenagers, before they're swimming away from your supervision. Government funding plays a really crucial role. We're a fundamental believer in the role of swimming education in schools and also the vacation programs that are rolling out across January in many local communities, including regional areas. We're also talking to government quite actively about actually how do we level out swimming skills across the community? How do we ensure that all Australians, irrespective of their cultural background, have access to swimming lessons? They're able to choose to go to the local pool, that they learn not just for drowning prevention, but also because it's great fun. It's, particularly at this time of year, I think there's a lot of people that avoid the water and miss out on just how wonderful it can be. So if we can boost their swimming skills, not only will they stay safe, but they'll figure out how to be healthy, how to have fun, how to stay fit, and it's good for their health and well-being.
And what about the need for a new nationwide education campaign, better signage at especially remote beaches? Because there is a real issue that a lot of us think, we jump into the ocean, but there's not a real understanding of how dangerous rips can be, even if you are an incredibly strong and skilled swimmer.
Yeah, look, Surf Life Saving do a wonderful job in this area in terms of reminding people of the hazards of on beaches and rips. There's pretty consistent campaigning on that particular topic. I do agree that perhaps listeners are a little bit confused by all the messages going out across summer. It can be a little bit hard to follow at times. Certainly there is a role for a very significant national campaign. It needs to be well funded if that's the case. But remembering that water safety is such a diverse issue, sadly people are exposed to water in all sorts of contexts. So at this time of year, it's not just the beach, it's also inland waterways, rivers and lakes. Sadly, it's the backyard pool. People are having barbecues and perhaps they don't have someone supervising children at all times. We see a problem with people drowning in rural properties, particularly at this time of year when the families come from the city to the local farm, don't quite understand just how dangerous the dam is. So we've got to be campaigning across a range of areas, but we would always just reinforce the importance of having a solid foundation in terms of swimming and water safety skills, building those layers of resilience, helping people enjoy the water and helping them enjoy the water safely.
And constant supervision, especially for children. We really appreciate your time, Justin. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
That was Justin Scarr, the CEO of Royal Lifesaving Australia. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. Before you go, we'd love it if you could share this episode with someone you think may enjoy it. And you can also check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Natarsha Belling. See you next time.